All right, we're going to get started here promptly at 3 p.m. Welcome to this webinar called Innovating in an Era of Uncertainty. As you guys can imagine, we felt like it was a prompt topic to be talking about in this time, as there's a lot going on in our world. Really, I just want to give an introduction to myself. I know quite a few of you guys already know who I am. You might be customers, you might be prospects, you might be people who've talked with. You may have heard our podcast, Ask an Innovator. And my name is Josh Barker. So I'll be kind of your host and guide through this presentation. And some background about me. So I run a firm called City Innovation Labs, and we're a digital innovation and product transformation company. So we're very ROI driven and focused on helping find, prototype, and build the right thing. That's a little bit about me, and my background is working Big Four. I was a director at KPMG as well as a CTO in Silicon Valley, which is really where City Innovation Labs came out of. And a lot of what we're going to talk about with innovation are concepts that came from both the Big Four as well as my experience in Silicon Valley. So without further ado, let's kick things off here. So obviously, today's world is a different place. Obviously, COVID-19 is changing all aspects of our life. I mean, there's no doubt, starting with that and just acknowledging it, that we're in a far different world than we were 2 to 4 weeks ago. It was a far different place. My inbox is proof of that. Inbox had a lot of, hey, let's talk about the next project. Let's talk about this roadmap. And now my inbox is full, if you're like me, it's full of all COVID-19 type things, where that's all people can start to think about and start talking about is COVID-19. What are we going to do about that? What are we going to do to help employees? What are we going to do to continue revenue as a lot of operations have been paused across the board? How are we going to work remotely? There's a lot of these types of questions, and this webinar is going to kind of go through an approach for those. So the physical health of the workers, the economic well-being, scarcity, and fear-driven mentality. It's a different world, like we were talking about. So like we were saying, business is not as usual. So this presentation is really 5 changes that innovative leaders need to make in times of uncertainty. So we're going to go through all 5 of those changes, starting with the first one. So the first one is a mindset change. This one is obviously a good one to start with, because as we're going into our presentation, even innovation itself requires a little bit of a mindset shift in thinking. It's not something that you need to keep thinking about, how do I optimize, but how do I think outside of the box? And that's what really COVID-19 is forcing a lot of businesses to rethink and re-strategize. So starting with a mindset change feels appropriate to say that's the first thing that really needs to change out of the 5 things. So really, there are 2 types of leaders. If you're talking about mindsets, you're really talking about 2 different types of leaders in a crisis. So often times people are naturally fear-driven. They have an inclination to and proclivity to that, but they often want to live with someone that's faith-driven. So those are the 2 different types of leaders, of faith-driven leader and a fear-driven leader. And I've kind of outlined some examples of how those are different types of leaders and people. A fear-driven person is very scared, panicked, doubtful, and obviously the antithesis of that is a faith-driven leader who's strong, calm, courageous. Fear-driven being self-first and preservation-focused, rather than people first and being helpful. In this time, we need to be thinking about others first. We need to be thinking about our customers and our employees and our people, and everyone else is in the same boat together. Not thinking of how do we preserve self. Yeah, we want to be concerned about our families, but we also need to be concerned about communities and our people. A lot of times, fear-driven people have knee-jerk reactions versus a more of a measured response. So it's very easy when something like this happens to be fear-driven and make decisions like, we need to let so-and-so go. We need to make immediate action. While some of that is good, we'll talk about that in a second, taking a very quick response, being quick to respond. It also means taking a very measured response rather than a knee-jerk reaction. Taking some time to take a step back and analyze the situation. Oftentimes, fear-driven people are risk-averse and are very short-term minded. there's nothing wrong with being risk averse, unless it's to the point of not making future decisions that are really going to be long term minded and decisive for the company. I've seen a lot of people in this time and age that are very much making short term decisions and not really thinking about long term ramifications. For us as a business, right now, what that means is we have a really solid team, and we're also experiencing some of the effects of a lot of what's going on, where some of our prospects have put things on hold. Some customers have put projects on hold as well. And so I think a knee-jerk reaction, and one that would be risk-averse and short-term minded, would be, hey, we need to let everyone immediately go, and we need to not think about the future. While having that future in mind is really what we need to be doing. And instead of being reactive and unclear, being proactive and clear. Employees, with employees and people, as a leader, being clear about what the future holds. Instead of being defensive and closed-minded, being vulnerable, transparent, open-minded, saying we don't have all the answers. We're not sure what the future holds, but being transparent about the information we do have, and some of the information that we have and that is guiding our decision making. Being, instead of being pessimistic and negative, being optimistic and positive. And really the last thing in this list that I really want to focus on for a minute in terms of talking about a mindset shift is victim-based mentality versus opportunity-based mentality. So really, when you start talking about what is victim-based versus opportunity-based mentality, a lot of people we're talking about in terms of innovation, right? In terms of how do you innovate in a time of uncertainty. They really look at things and they say, well, a victim-based mentality would be thinking of things if only, right? If only the coronavirus didn't come to the United States or wherever you live. If only, we had more time. If only we had this government bailout sooner. If only, and fill in the blank, right? Being a victim of your circumstance rather than kind of taking ownership and saying no one is going to take ownership except for us. We're going to step up. And we're going to have an opportunity-based mentality, where instead of thinking of if only, you're thinking because of this, right? Because of this, I say it with an exclamation point, because saying there is opportunity, saying because of this, it opens up new opportunities for us. But because of this, we're able to. Some of our customers have even found this is time to execute on projects, to leapfrog the competition, where the competition might be taking a break during this time, but using it as a competitive advantage. So using an opportunity-based mentality instead of this is a victim mentality. So the first one, again, to recap, is a mindset shift, to say, let's shift more of an opportunity-based mentality over a victim-based mentality, helping us move in that direction. So change number 2, talking about out of the 5 changes that innovative leaders need to make during this time, is change number 2 is mission change. And so what do I mean by mission change? And the disclaimer here is I don't necessarily mean rewrite your mission statement, right? I mean, a mission statement should be a home base and an organizational identity. What I mean is it's a great time to review it. So here are some questions to ask about your mission statement in this time. Kind of going all the way back. As leaders, it's a good practice to start with the end in mind. And if you want to start kind of with the end in mind, go back to your mission statement, go back to your home base, go back to your identity. So what is your mission statement? And asking yourself, is your mission statement uninspiring? So is there no sense of higher calling in it? And if there is, uninspiring, no sense of higher calling, take the time to ramp it, to say, what should we make it to be more inspiring, to be more long-term focused, to be more broad? Is it the second thing? Is it unfocused, right? So is there no sense of direction? Is it unclear of what our mission is? Is it us focused? Is it to us focused? So it's not focused on others that you're helping. Is it too narrow? Is it no longer relevant? The coronavirus has changed a lot of things in our lives. So a question we should be asking ourselves is, about our mission statement, is what is now our home base and who is our identity as an organization? And then the last thing is too constrictive. So is it not adaptable to the changing times? So some good examples would be basically looking at Facebook. If you look at Facebook's mission, is they want to connect the world. That's a very broad mission statement, but it actually fits in a lot of different ways. It's not just that they're a social network that connects the world. They're a social network that might be too constrictive, too narrow, but they're more broad, and they say we want to connect the world. So that's why you're seeing, when you look at the news and you're looking at all the innovation that come out of it, is they're coming up with things like devices that are sitting on your desk that you can video conference people, and it moves along as you move around in the room, and things like hot air balloons with actual 5G in them. So all of these different things that Facebook is kind of talking about and doing right now, they're bigger, broader things that encapsulate a broader vision or a mission that really is, how do we connect the world? How do we connect people together? So be thinking about and evaluating your mission in this time. So, and really, I mean, if we start with the mission, is the big picture question to ask here is, how can we accomplish the mission after you've evaluated it? And maybe it requires tweaking and maybe it doesn't, is how can you accomplish the mission given the current landscape? I think a great example of this is basically kind of going back and rethinking for us when one of our customers actually is in this doing conferences and fabricating the conference booths and all the conference banners. So a great thing to look at would be during this time is, instead of fabricating all these physical, tangible things, which you can imagine with the coronavirus, it really has them constricted to a physical space and with no conferences going on. How might they reinvent themselves during this time? They're talking about, things like, well, how might we become the premier digital conference event hoster, to where we can put on these digital conferences that people can attend, and maybe it uses technologies like webinars, or it uses technologies like Google Hangouts or anything, web conferencing solutions to connect people. So a really interesting question, and they kind of went back to the mission statement of really, thinking through is like, are we really narrow focused about just physically creating these items for physical, tangible conferences, or is it more about, like we were talking about with Facebook, is it more about connecting those around us for like-minded activities, like whether technology conferences or the like? So the first thing is the mindset, reevaluating your mindset. The second thing is to change really your mission, or to reevaluate your mission. And the third thing is really, I know this sounds kind of weird, is change number 3 is quick change, is to evaluate, as you're starting to evaluate your mission statement, you're able to kind of identify what are some more quick things we can do to help those, or to help our business. So there's some key questions that we've identified, and we've created a workshop, which I'll go over at the very end. We've created a workshop that kind of guides through some questions, but I'm going to ask some key questions about change. So, a question is, a part of being a faith-driven leader during a time of crisis is knowing, is fear ruling your decision-making, or is it not? And are you being faith-driven? And so when I say that, not all quick decisions are fear-driven, but oftentimes you have to evaluate and ask yourself, are they? That's what a quick disclaimer would be to this, is making sure that you're not making knee-jerk reactions, but you're moving quickly and decisively. And so really there's 2 different steps that we've identified in our company. I call them the 3 Ps. So pause, pray, and then plan. So it's probably a good methodology to follow, especially in a time of crisis, is to kind of pause and take a beat. Don't knee-jerk react and with the environment, but make sure you're creating a very measured response like we talked about. And then execute and come up with quick and actionable items that change the game. So there are a lot of companies, obviously, that are changing and adapting to the times, and some great examples, which I'll list in a minute here after we go over this next slide, is going over the questions that we asked first is, what pain are our customers experiencing first? I think it really boils down to being empathetic with customers. What can we do quickly? What is really in their heads? And during this time of crisis, the biggest things that customers are concentrating on is, how do I move quickly and adapt quickly to the changing environment with my business? No one planned for an epidemic like this, right? No, a pandemic. No one planned for a virus to be released. And no one planned for people rushing to the stores and for businesses to be shut down. So that's the pain a lot of the customers are experiencing, right? So it's how can I adapt to the changing times and ask my customers, how can we help? How can we move quickly, really, and having a spirit of help. The second thing is what can we do to tweak our product offering that takes the market pressures into account? The example I was going to give just a second ago, which I wanted to just delay to this question, was one of my favorite shops around our office in downtown East Grand Rapids in Michigan is really makes smoothies. And so I really enjoy going to get a good smoothie at lunch. And one of the cool things that they've done is they've actually instead of, because their place was shut down and they wanted to continue to service their customers, they actually changed their business model to include not pre-mixing the ingredients, just to have the ingredients just out and not mixed. So you can go up and pick up, 6 or 12 of these drinks that might have a whole jar of, strawberries that are cut up, sliced with bananas, or whatever ones you choose. And then you have to take them back and you go ahead and you would, when you're ready and you take them out of the fridge or the freezer, you would blend them whenever you're ready. So they've kind of adapted their business model for the changing times to incorporate things like social distancing. And we've seen this all over, even with takeout places, of requiring people to kind of stay outside and really funnel people within a 6-foot difference, 6-foot distance, away from one another. So it's a really interesting, time to see people get creative on doing things like takeout. And so really cool things, and they're doing that really quickly. They've adapted their business models to, change ingredients, adapted business models and takeout options to include safety measures for the COVID-19 virus. So it's a very interesting time. So, and the last thing is, what resources do we have available, and can we use them for other purposes and help address some of the customers' immediate pain points? An example I would give here is, I don't know if you guys have been following Elon Musk during this time. He would be another great innovator. One of the things that he's doing which is really fascinating, he's taking a look at all of the different warehouses he has and all the different manufacturing plants, manufacturing power that he has. And he's noticing, hey, we have all the capabilities of actually helping during this crisis, of actually changing our business to shift over where he's seeing an automotive industry that's a little bit more pressured during this time, obviously, as people are looking at the automotive industry and saying, why don't we start to really manufacture things like ventilators, where there's a shortage of ventilators? So he looked at what resources he had, and he looked at the people he had, and he quickly is trying to adapt to the changing times, and even starting to manufacture ventilators, for example. So these are some quick wins that can be done, and we've got a whole list of, as we go through the workshop, which I'll kind of explain at the end again, we've got a whole list of options we take companies through, and we kind of help them from an outsider's perspective really look at some of our experience, as well as look at their business and help them ask good questions and facilitate good conversations. So, and kind of the last note is that in times of uncertainty, customers are naturally going to be fear-driven, right? So they're going to have less money. They're going to have their risk appetite is going to be generally less confidence. But what I will say is they're looking for people to help solve quick answers to their problems. So that's one thing that we're trying to do with our customers, and we're trying to do with our prospects and people we work with, we interact with. We're really trying to come to them and offer quick solutions that might not cost a lot of money, but would help them tremendously in adapting to the situation that's here, which is the truth of the matter is the pandemic we have on hand. So that's the third change, is a quick change. What quick changes can we help bring to the business, and what quick changes can we adapt to the marketplace and rapidly service our customers and be good vendors to our customers. And the fourth change really is strategic change. And this one is actually a little bit more difficult, I'll preface, to do well during this time of to not be fear driven and let fear creep in to say, hey, we don't have time for doing anything, any strategic moves or any strategic plays. And all of that, I would say, is fear talk. So there are definitely, while it's good to be expedient, make quick changes, and to be responsive, it's also good to take a step back and to create a small amount of margin. We're talking about, even a little time during your day to think strategically, right? So it's a fallacy that we have no time at all, when really, we can take 30 minutes here, an hour here, to really sit back and think strategically. So here, what we're talking about is when, asking questions of, when was the last time you evaluated your business model? So we use a tool called the Business Model Canvas. Highly recommend it. For those of you who haven't used it, it's a great way to take a look at a snapshot at your business. It's a very agile approach to it too. A lot of business models are, have pages and pages of documents to go through, but really asking yourself in a lightweight way. We're not talking about, evaluating, 50-page, business consulting document. We're talking about a lightweight way. When have you evaluated your business model? And then measuring it against the current market, right? So the current market as well as the future market. So that's where the strategic part comes in. And the second part is how will COVID-19 affect business long term? It's far too easy and such an easy trap for us to fall into, to take a look at short term. How do we get over this short term? But it's good to look beyond that, to say, hey, how is this going to affect us more long term? As the virus is starting to be cured and a cure is discovered, or the economy starts to pick up, how are we going to, with some of the short-term decisions we're making, start to look at more of the long term? And how is this some businesses are taking a break during this time. Some businesses aren't, like we talked about. Some businesses are taking this as a competitive advantage time to leapfrog their competition. So how are you making sure that you're keeping that long distance view in mind? And the third thing is, how do I make sure short-term decision-making doesn't negatively impact the long term? And we talked a little bit about this, that one of the things that's easy for or a decision that businesses are making, and they think it's difficult to make, and while it might be difficult to make, it's also thinking through of, well, we have all these amazing people, and if we let them go, thinking through, we have projects when this upticks again. So trying to hold on to good people and trying to keep the team going and moving all in a direction, trying to keep the A team together. It's really those types of decisions, that making sure you're not making short-term decisions that are going to sacrifice the long-term, and always looking to the long-term in mind. The other thing that we tell our customers too is, obviously being a digital innovation product consultancy, we tell our customers is this is a great time too to evaluate, are there digital products we can create and diversify or support their current offerings, as well as start to create semblances of organization or optimizations that could be cost-saving measures in this time. So is there things we can do to save them money, or are there things we can do to create products that are new service offerings that, as we're all going digital, we're all going remote, we're obviously running into new challenges. And so some of those new challenges could be solved with new product offerings, that could be offered to customers to say, hey, during this time, we're able to offer this new product offering that's digital. That's something that people, obviously with the virus being out and about and people's health, being nervous and conscious about people's health, that's obviously things people are more interested in the digital world, because we have to, out of survival. And the last thing is there a way we can start our long-term strategy now in a smaller way to experiment, gather feedback, and iterate on it? Now is a great time if there's any thought to a longer strategy, like we just talked about with a digital product offering or something small, even if it isn't digital, but it's a concept that has been tossed around. Now is a great time to start testing a lot of those that haven't been tested before. We're talking about from an innovation standpoint, where a lot of those have been shelved. And so evaluating them in this time and saying, is this a good time for us to unshelf this idea and really start to, when I say the word experiment, a great book to explore that I've encouraged a lot of our customers with is reading the book Lean Startup. And this is what I mean when I'm talking about experimentation, is testing the market, and really, before you go out and build something, really seeing if something is even worth your time building. And that could mean building a rapid prototype. It could mean building a minimum viable product. It could even mean an experiment that doesn't require code, where maybe you're assembling a just like this webinar, for example, assembling it quickly. That's how we operate a lot at City Innovation Labs, where we'll throw something together very quickly, and we'll see what kind of traction it gets. And usually the ones that have the greatest traction are the ones that stick around for a while. So use this time to experiment, gather feedback from your customers. And the other thing I would say is talk to your customers. This is the time to form relationships. As everyone's at home, as you can see, I'm at home. As everyone's at home, everyone's having cabin fever. They want to talk to people. Now is a great time to talk to your customers, to talk to them about how they're doing, and to really forge those relationships. And what I would say is things like be thinking about even marketing in the future term. If I'm making sure that, marketing, meaning the greatest marketing strategy is relationships, and concentrating on, hey, I'm just here to help, right? And this is the time that we really want to help our community members around us. It's not the time to push anything on anyone. It's the time to surround people with love and pray for them and to talk with them. So really gather feedback, talk to your customers, and iterate on what we have. So, all right. So the next thing is people and process change. So people and process change is the fifth change that we're going to be talking about now, which is obvious. A lot of things to change with people and process as we're adapting to a new way of work. People are working remotely, they're working from home. Lot of things going on. So this is a bigger topic. We're going to kind of divide it out into people first, and then talk a little bit about process change. So people change. So the first thing we're going to talk about is people change. So there's a lot of questions to ask as you're thinking through your team. So the first and foremost, like we talked about, you're talking to your customers. Really, it's all about people. It's all about people. And so asking even from a team change is, how can I help my people through this time? We've asked this question to a lot of our own employees, and it's a crazy time, right? Schools are closed, and with schools being closed and people working from home, all sorts of new problems arise, right? And you have to be creative. You have to be innovative. You have to really start thinking through and talking to your employees and saying, hey, in this new changing environment, how can I, I've got a 4-year-old, and a 2-year-old and a 1-year-old. How can I actually do my work and at the same time be able to do a webinar like this, right? So that's something we've never had to think through before, where we haven't been able to go to the office and we've been at home. So how can I? And the second one is, how can I use this as an opportunity to build camaraderie and unity rather than division? So this is a really interesting time where now people are working remotely, and they're not understanding how do I build a remote team? How do I put remote, have a remote culture? How do I, culture is a huge one, is how do I even create a culture remotely? Because if everyone is in their own world and they're all in their own homes, how do I make sure that people feel loved and cared for, and that we're a team, that we're a cohesive unit, we're working together, we're collaborating appropriately and effectively? So how can we do that and build camaraderie and unity rather than being isolationists and having division? So that's a huge topic. And the next one is do I have the right team members on my team given the present circumstances? So, with this new environment, talking about new quick wins and new long-term strategies, you might identify that, you might need, we're a digital product innovation firm. You might need more digital because you're doing a lot more work digitally, or you might need, a team that is more familiar with remote work, or you might need fill in the blank, right? So you might need team members that you don't currently have because there's just a new way of doing work now. And what gaps, that brings up gaps. So what gaps do you have on your team? A great time to reevaluate the gaps as you're thinking of it. New skills that are needed, and during this new and different time, what new skills are needed, right? So it's a very interesting time to start thinking about innovation, to say, hey, who can help us think through creative ways to solve these problems that we've never encountered before? So it's a very unique time that we need a lot of people to think outside of the box. I'm very blessed to have such a solid team that helps all of us collectively think out of the box. We just had a brainstorm, a COVID-19 brainstorm today as a team, and we were able to generate a lot of cool ideas in order to keep culture intact, in order to be a positive influence to our community, in order to really even address some of our customer concerns with COVID-19. So definitely a wide range of skills that are new and needed. And then the last question is what needs to change with the present team during this environment, right? So I know a lot of our customers are having their people work from home for the first time, and they're asking questions to us of how do you do it effectively? Because at City Innovation Labs, we've had a remote culture for a long time. While we have an office downtown East Grand Rapids, we also have we work out of 1871 in Chicago. While we have these locations, we've been very remotely distributed. We've been a team that very much is what I would say location agnostic for us, and we've used it as a competitive advantage, being able to work anywhere, being able to work on the road, being able to work in different states, different countries. So for us, what do you need to change, and what needs to adapt to this new environment of how you adapt to remote work, right? So I'll offer it out from us as well at City Innovation Labs. I'm happy to discuss it with anyone that's hearing this webinar on how do I effectively work remotely and how do I build a remote team and a remote culture. Happy to talk with anyone about any of those topics at any point. So feel free to email me. It's josh.barker@cityinnovationlabs.com. So the next thing is process change. So really, obviously, with I'm going to group tools into this bucket as well of process, but how do you what tools can help us work more effectively remotely? We're working with a lot of different companies right now and helping them understand tools like Slack, Google Hangouts, Zoom, right? Zoom video, even this webinar, right? How do you take these tools and how do you use them most effectively? Because it's also not about tools, because that's why I group tools and process together, but they're different because you could be using all the tools, but there are great best practices to using these tools. I sat down with a customer this week and really talked about, here in Grand Rapids, over virtual coffee, and from home to home. And we talked a lot about how, Josh, of you and your team really effectively kept culture going and what tools are you using for that, but what's more was what processes. So I sat down with him, kind of outlined, hey, here's some meetings that we have every week that really, prime example is what builds culture. It's what I tell our customers, it's the in-between time typically in an organization, meaning if you're moving from meeting to meeting, if you're co-located together, if you're in a building, it's that in-between time where it's water cooler chat. You're talking to one another as you're going to and from a meeting. But if you're in a remote environment, there's no water cooler chat. There is no in-between meeting times. It's you're on or you're off. So for us, we've actually had to, we've built some best practices, which you can find on our blog as well at cityinnovationlabs.com. We built out some best practices that are helpful to build water cooler chat and being more intentional with water cooler chat, scheduling that time. So every week, as an example, we have something called the week view. And so that's on Monday morning, first thing Monday morning. If you can imagine, for optimization's sake, you go into meeting after meeting after meeting remotely. There's a question that arises on Mondays. How was your weekend? And so usually we cut it off at the pass by having one giant meeting that we all talk about how our weekends went. So we're not going from meeting to meeting to meeting to meeting and talking about how our weekends went, because we actually got it all out in our week view and we were able to talk about it. So for us, we've learned these practices, these best practices in building intentional culture remotely, which we're happy to guide you through and with the tools and the processes. So second one is, how do we adapt our current physical processes to a digital and remote one? There's a lot of, and up above in that first bullet point, as well as I want to touch on for the second bullet, is there's a lot of IT challenges, for example, of moving physical processes to a digital one. So giving some examples of, maybe when you're at work, you have a share drive, and maybe you do work off this share drive, or maybe you have a VPN connection, but your remote work from home policy was very laissez-faire, was very like, hey, a few people here and there need it, but most people are working on site. Well, now your VPN connection might be overwhelmed. So we actually come in this workshop and we can help identify two of what IT challenges are there. And we've partnered with a great firm. Their name is OpStack. And so we partner with a great firm to really help bring that to market of helping alleviate some of those IT challenges and executing on it and helping with VPN problems or shared drive problems. And we can do it rapidly. So, and help set up tools and processes and systems. And so how do we adapt current physical processes and then brainstorming how might we do those digitally? So we do that together. And then the last thing, on this page is I'm sure there's tons of more process, stuff you guys can think of. There's a lot more in our workshop as well. Really, it's, what about marketing during this time? And what do we change about our messaging? I'm going to hit on this again is, my advice would be don't stop marketing, but you definitely need to change your marketing message. And the marketing message should be all about people. I'm going to emphasize that point again. I can't hit that enough is that loving your people, whether that's, your customers or your employees, that should be the message, and doing it in a way that's, how do you do that most effectively? And how do you come beside customers and come beside people in your market, and really love on them and ask them, hey, how can I help you during this time? And so that's what we're doing even here in this webinar. We're trying to give you guys some value of how do you, what are the 5 changes that an innovative leader needs to make, so being able to kind of walk through all of those with you guys is a blessing to me. So that's really, process. And then the last thing is how do you change your messaging, as we said, is literally just be real with people, be transparent. The coronavirus is affecting everyone, and we're here to help. So, and that's really the entire webinar. So I wanted to, we finished a little bit early. I wanted to leave a little bit of time for Q&A, but what I wanted to also do is invite all you guys to the full Innovating in an Era of Uncertainty workshop. We do offer a kind of a free 1-hour primer. So we're happy to, what that looks like is we're happy to walk you guys through, what that looks like. If you're interested, just shoot me an email. We can shoot you information over on what that looks like, josh.barker@cityinnovationlabs.com. I don't think you can read my email. It's on that screen. It's in blue. But it's a free 1-hour session that we walk through, and we help answer a lot of those questions with you. We provide some facilitation. We provide a lot of questions and a good roadmap for how to answer those questions. And we've got a lot of experience behind our belt with working with a lot of different firms on innovating, and how do you, especially innovating in time of uncertainty, innovating with constraints. That's basically what we're talking about, is innovating with a time of very low cash, very low, there's uncertainty all over the place, high risk. But now is really the breeding grounds for innovation. And that's what you're going to start to see everywhere. If you guys haven't already, as you look around, you're going to start to see a lot of innovation happening, a lot of creativity, like I was talking about with some of the smoothie places, with some of the delivery places, and like, and even Elon Musk changing his business model. There's going to be a lot of creativity, and we hope that we can help be a blessing to you guys during this time, and that we can also help you be innovative and you be creative during this time, and you adapt to the crazy changing landscape. So yeah, that's really it, guys. I really appreciate your time. A lot of fun. I'm just going to, be quiet for a minute. There's a Q&A box. I'm going to pause here and see if there's any Q&A questions that come up, and give about a minute or two, answer any that come in. And if there's not, we'll just wrap it up, and this should be recorded. Feel free to send off a link. And yeah, any other things that I can help you with. So I'm going to pause. So there was a question that came in on what I talked about, IT and strain on the VPN. So that's a question that asking if I can send that information. So definitely can send that information over. And feel free to shoot me an email, josh.barker@cityinnovationlabs.com. And I will definitely send you over some information on that. So that we've got about I think it's a 2 or 3 pager on like what's provided. And it can be definitely something that we can help alleviate. So definitely send that over. Any other questions? I'll wait here for a minute, see if any other come in. Another one on a shared drive. So asking about, sounds like the, excuse me, the technology type questions are really interesting to people in a time of working remote. Yeah, so I can send information about that as well. So if there's some people that are having some real problems working remote. Part of this workshop that we talked about, this primer, is the nice thing is we really gear it towards whatever that we customize it on a per team basis. We kind of have a general outline, but we'll usually do before doing the 1 hour primer because we want to make it kind of worth your time. Even though it's free, we want to make it worth it. So for us, what that primer could look like for some people would be, I'm getting questions about kind of the IT portion. It could be a focus on, hey, let's walk through some IT related challenges and start there. And another way we could look at it is, I just got another question too about working remotely is, how do we work remotely? Basically at a high level, how do I effectively work from home remotely? So that is something we could focus on too. How do you work from home effectively? So we can definitely, since our team has a lot of experience with working from home and working remotely, overall working remotely, we'd be happy to form kind of that primer around that subject area. But yeah. Any other questions as you guys are thinking about innovation in a time of uncertainty? I don't know if you guys can hear my kids. They're 4 and 2, and I can hear them right outside my door. All right. Well, I'll leave you with one last note. Feel free to email me again. I'll reiterate my email, josh.barker@cityinnovationlabs.com. We are just letting you know, at City Innovation Labs, our message to all of you guys listening in is we're here to help you. We really want to help you during this time. We're here along with you, right? The whole world is along here with you. And so we want to see your business succeed. We want to do everything we can to help you get through this time. And we feel we've got a good amount to offer. If you guys are interested, we totally want to talk about things like remote work, IT challenges. Want to talk about, how do you innovate during this time? Should I spend more in innovation, less in innovation? How do I look at the long-term strategic roadmap? All these questions and any questions you have from a technology perspective, from a business technology perspective, we really want to help you out in that area. So I really appreciate you guys' time a lot. It's been good questions as well. It was fairly engaging, so I'm glad that it was helpful. So appreciate you guys' time. I'm going to give you 15 minutes back, and hope you have a great rest of your day, guys. All right, bye-bye.